so now let's because I want to stick with the slides also. So this is what they explain you, that this is the code here. So they say that think about it, right? So what do you think? What will happen when we run the program? It will crash. Why it will crash?
Because on index 5.
Yes. So how many items you have in the array? You have 5 items, right? But we have to remember that array starts with 0. So actually the index is not 1 to 5, but the index is 0 to 4. There are 5 items, but the index starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the loop what you are doing, you are saying less than or equal to 5. That means you are going to the 5th index also, and you don't have the 5th index. So after 4th, the 5th index, the moment it trying to look, it does not find any program will crash. Okay? So this is the exception that will occur, that array index out of bound exception, and it will give you the index 5. Okay? So this is what basically the exceptions are. Okay? And this is another example I just showed you, that if you have a number and you have a denominator 0 and you try to do this, your program will crash. Okay? And the reason for that is the arithmetic exception. So you will get this message here, something like this. So, so when we write a program, so there are always chances that you might have runtime errors. And when the runtime errors will occur, your program will terminate abnormally. Okay? So this is, we don't want. Even if you are a very good developer, and if you don't implement the exception handling in your program will be of no use. Because exception, once it occurs, your program basically terminates abnormally. Okay? So if you are good in programming and you want it to be like an expert, so you have to learn exception handling. And this is used in all the programming language. It's not that it is only for the Java, it is for every programming language. You have to deal with the exceptions. Okay? Because these type of issues are there in all the programming languages, and you have to handle these issues. So how you can handle the runtime errors so that the program can continue to run or terminate gracefully. Okay, this is what I mentioned to you. That if you can run the program, still you can run the program, that's fine. So in certain cases where you are asking user to enter the data, so in those cases, okay, you will say user please enter again because you have entered wrong data. But in some cases, you cannot continue, your program cannot continue because you don't have a resource available, as I mentioned to you. Let's suppose you are trying to read a file and the file is not there. What your program will do? You try to read a server is off because of any reason. Program cannot continue because you need the data, right? So what you will do, you will just give a message and your program will exit. That sorry, unable to connect to your database, something like that. Okay? So that's what we need to learn. Okay? So exceptions handling give us another opportunity to recover from the abnormality. So using the exception handling, we get another chance so that we can recover from these abnormality if we can. Okay, so that's the important thing. So we are going to see all these, of course, objectives. So we'll see what is exception, what is exception handling, and then we have checked and checked. There are so many concepts that we have to learn in this chapter. Fine. So this is another example they just showed you. I think I already showed you this example. So how to fix it? Of course, you can use if statement, but the if statement you can use to fix it. For example, as they mention to you here, okay, that you will say, okay, if it is the second parameter, if it is 0, then you give a message and you exit. Okay, something like this. This is one of the approach which you can use, but this is not a recommended one, because imagine if you are developing large systems, how many if statements you will be using it. Okay, you need a better approach, you need a better way instead of going through this approach. Okay, so we have to learn basically exception handling, because this will unnecessarily just terminate the method, okay, without knowing the callee that what happens. Understand the point? So you have to somehow inform your method who is calling the other method that what happened, why the program ends or terminates, what is the reason for it. Okay, so if the reason is such that you can continue, you will continue, otherwise you will just gracefully exit. So all those you can handle it with the something called exception handling. Okay, so now before we go to the code and we go to the detail, so let me just show you something. So I hope you have now a basic idea of exception handling, right? So let's try it further. So now we have to learn exception handling, okay? So there are two ways that you can basically deal with the exception. So when the exception occurs, so we can basically deal the exception in two ways. One is called basically the handling, the actual handling, okay? And the other one is something what you are throwing it, something like throwing the exception, throwing, something like that. Okay, so we need to see what is the difference between them. Okay, so when the exception occurs, suppose in your code, what you can do, you have two options. One is to handle the exception and the other one is to throw the exception. Now throwing the exception, if you remember when you use the file related code, what you do? You write a method and there's something like a throw, something comes from the NetBeans, right? So that thing is throwing. Anyway, so I will explain you that. Now, what is the meaning of handling? Handling means you will use certain statement which looks like this. So you will say something like a try, and you will have your statements here, and then you will have here catch. And here you will write the exception. Exception type 1, okay? Of course, one type, and then in the same way catch. Because in your code there are possibilities of having different type of exception. Like for example, in this code what we have here, how many types of exceptions there are possibilities? 3 types, right? Input mismatch, arrays index out of bound exception, as well as input mismatch, arrays index out of bound exception, and arithmetic exception, right? So we will have here multiple catch statement. Okay, so this is exception, yeah, type 2, and so on. Okay, so this continues till catch n. So this is basically your handling. So what you do, all your code that you think there are possibilities of having exception, that you put it in the try block. Okay, so your code will be in the try block. Okay, so for example, I know that when I am accessing an array, when I am asking you to input, when I am doing certain mathematical calculation, these code I will put it inside the try block. Okay, so I'm just saying that okay, try this, and if anything happen, in any exception happen, then go to the catch. Okay, so so for example, if this is your line, let's say line number 3, and if the exception occurred here in this line, so exception occurred here, so what will happen? It will go to the catch, the first catch, and it will check here whether the exception occurred because of this type. If it is, then it will go here, and it will not go to the other catch. Okay, but if the exception occurred is because of any other type, so he will go to the next catch. It is same like if and else. So what you do in it, if and else, you check the condition. If the condition is matching, it goes to that block and it just ignore the other one. Okay, if it does not matches that condition, then it goes to the else if. So it is very similar idea here. So what you do, you say try this all. If the exception occur, what will happen? Your code will basically terminate from the line where the exception occurred. That's the very important for you to understand. So suppose in the line number 3 we have an exception. So what will happen? Immediately he will go to the catch, starting from the first catch, whatever you write. So these lines of code will not be executed. Okay? We will see how we can execute it. We will see that. But first, try to understand the basic concept of handling the exception. Okay? First, we will see this. Then we will go to this one, the second time. So when we actually say we are handling the exception, or what to deal with the exception, better what to do with the exception. So we handle it, or we sometimes throw it. Okay? So let's try to. I hope you have this idea now. Any question you have this, that what we are doing here? So we use the try and catch block. Okay? So we will have to use something like a try, and then starting block, and then we write our code inside this, and then we close the try block, and then we write our catch. Clear? Any question? Up to here it's clear? Okay, so let's try to apply this concept in our code and see what will happen. Okay, so what we are going to do now, so we know that up to here maybe there will not be any issue, right? You can declare all of them in try, no problem. So we just put here try, okay? We do something like this, try, and we move all these statements inside the try block. Okay, so we just put try this all, and then here what we do, we say catch. Now, what are the possibilities of exceptions that we have? Okay, we have like array. So arrays index out of bound exception possibilities are there. So what we will need to do is we need to write this exception type, because what is happening when the exception occurs, it creates an object and it just returns that object. You understand the point? So here what you will do, you will say array a control space, and you see it gives you arrays index out of bound exception, and then you declare an object of it. Okay, and here you can use e, because inside this object e is an object of arrays index out of bound class. Okay, so it is same like when the exception occurs because of the array, then it will come here. Okay, and now inside the e you will have everything, like you can trace the code, you can get the message why the exception occur. All these things will be automatically, it will be available in e. E is just an object of this class. Which class? Array index out of bound exception. So I write here e, you can write anything, you write your name. You understand the point? So e is just an object. So you can write e, you can write exp, up to you, exp, up to you. Okay, it's just an object. And then you can write your own for example, statement, whatever you want you can do. For example, you can say that array program has some array issues, or array index out of bound, or the array size, check the array size, up to you, the message, something like check array size and references. So now when the exception will occur, your program will basically gracefully exit. It will gracefully exit. Instead of crashing it, it will gracefully exit. Okay, so what we have done, we just put a try statement. We are saying, okay, try this code, and if the exception occur, which type? Arrays index out of bound, then you go to the catch of it and display this message. Okay, now let me just run this, and then I will explain you what happens. So let's run this again. So you can see here, now exception occur, your program exit, but it exit gracefully. Okay, so you get a message here, the message, the one you have written. Now why it is important to give like a proper message? Imagine if you are writing a large application. When the user is testing your application, or when your tester is testing the application, or you are testing an application. So exception will occur, and you will not know from where the exception occurs, because you have so many classes, all are related, the whole system is running. So you have to give a proper message. Okay, so I will, if the time permits, I will show you like how you can properly give certain code to know that this error occurs because of this program, for example. Imagine when you are developing large system, you will not have one class, two class, one method, two method. You will have thousands of classes. So how you will know where the exception occurs? So you have to use certain coding in your application, certain type of code you will define. So you will know, oh, if this code comes, that means the exception occur in that particular package, in that particular class. You understand point? So anyway, so for the time being, so what the program is doing, let's try to analyze this. So your program runs, it starts running from here, right? So everything is fine, but this moment, this line generates an exception, right? Because we don't have space for. So what will happen? This line of code your program will crash from here. So these lines are not basically, it will not execute. So from here it will go to the cache, and luckily you have this exception. And same type of exception that occur, you have it here. So it will catch and it will gracefully exit. You understand the point? Imagine if this is fine and you have a problem here. Even though you have a try and catch, even though your program will can crash. Let's try to see this, what I will say. Suppose I fix this. Now when I run this, whether I get this exception or not?
No.
No. So if your program runs fine, so this will be ignored. Okay, catch statement will be ignored. It will not it will come here. No, it will not come. So let's run this. See? So this is running fine, so now your program is here. And suppose I enter everything fine and your program runs fine. Okay, so there is no catch statement executes. So what we understand that the catch statement will be executed only when the exception will occur of that type. What is the meaning of that? Now let me run this again. Now if I say 5.0, you have the try and catch, but again your program crashes. Right or not? You have try and catch. Why my program is crashing? Why it is
Other
not?
type of exception.
Yes, you don't have that type of exception in the catch block. You understand the point? So now the type is different here. So in input mismatch, exception, clause, you have to add here. You have to say, okay, if it is this type, please do it this. So this is, you can write anything E, and you have to import it because this is. And then you can say, for example, check your data or something. Check the data entered.
Type.
Yeah, typo mistake or data entered is wrong, or something like data. So this is your message what you want to give. Okay, so now let's run this again. So the moment I enter my program, still it ends, but it ends gracefully. You know, you then see the message and then it come out of the running state. Okay, so here data entered is wrong and your program ends. Okay, now let's run this again. So now the third type. So I say 6 and then I say 0. Immediately my program crashed again. Even though I have the try and catch and all those things are there, right? You see here, I have the catch, I have the catch, I have the try, but still I don't have this, right? So I have to basically add the third type. Okay, this is the third type, for example E, and then I will say something like arithmetic exception or divide by 0, whatever. I will
Divide
say.
by 0.
Yeah, divide by 0. Divide by 0. 0 error. Okay. So now when I run this, at least I have all the possible exceptions. I handle it in my program. Okay. Now let me just go to the family. Now you have some idea now. I'm just skipping it if they have given. Yeah. So now I'm coming to this slide. Very, very important for you to see. If you see the whole exception family, it's a very big family. So you have an object which is the father of all the class. We know that, right? And then it has a subclass called throwable, and this throwable has two children, exception and error. Now under this exception you have all the exceptions. Okay, so it's a very big family, as I told you. So you can see here we have runtime exception, we have IO exception, class not found exception, so many database SQL exception, JDBC exception, so many different categories of exception you have, different subclasses, different families. Now under the runtime exception you have all these, the one we are just seeing. Arithmetic, null pointer exception also, I hope you have seen this one when you write the code. Index out of bound exception, illegal argument exception, sometimes when you give the wrong argument, that exception will be thrown. Okay, so who is the father of all the exception? Is basically the exception class. So what we need to do here, if we want to be safe from all the issues, so we have to mention here exception. Okay, exception. Now this is for any other issues that I have in my program, any other error. These are known errors to me, that my program will have maybe some exception because of array, because I use array. I have inputs, so might be the input mismatch will occur. So I have this exception. I have divide by zero. I'm dividing something, so might be exception, arithmetic exception. So I have to put all these above the superclass. Why? Because I have to be more close to the error. Okay, let me just show you one thing. Now, if I just remove all this, if I just put this, my problem will be solved. See, when I run this, let me put this file and run this. Any other error? Okay, now let's put it back to run this again. 6.0. Any other error? Why? Because these errors that is happening, input mismatch, arithmetic, they are all the children of exception. You understand? So if you have only this general exception here, if you have just catch exception, somehow you are able to, come out of this issue. But still, this is not a recommended approach. Why? Because I will not know what is the actual reason of the error. I have already showed you here. You see here? We have all these families, right? If I just use this, I will not know what type of error that occurred in my program when it is running. Imagine when we are developing large system, we have to be more close to the error, right? So we have to be more specific to the exception, why the error is happening at runtime when my program is running. What is the actual reason? If you just use the exception, you will not be able to know the actual reason. So you have to be more close to the error that happens in your program. That is why this you will use, but not at the first, but at the last catch. Okay? So exception you always use in your code, but this must be always. Now let me just do this. See, immediately Java will know this will never occur. Because Java know you put the father. So how the child will go? He will not go, right? So the try block, when the exception occurs, he will never reach to these statements because you have an exception here. So what you need to do, always you need to put your specific exceptions first and then your general exception. So same rule is applied, for example, here. If you have IO exception, now you have so many children of IO exception. So don't use only IO exception. You go for the specific within the IO exception. What is the actual reason? Whether the file is not found or there is a class not found. So there are so many exceptions, sub-exceptions that are defined in the IO family, IO exception family. So you have to be more close to the actual exception that occur in your code when your program is running. Okay? Any question up to here? Any sabak? So what I explain you here, that step one, when we write our code to overcome the issues of runtime errors, what we do, we use exception handling. And one of the way what you do in exception handling is you use the try and catch block. Okay? So what you do, you say try, and then you put all your statements, all your code inside the try block. And then you have the catches, okay? Based on what type of errors you are having. So you have to apply all the catch. So for example, if I want to write the file, or if I want to write the scanner, for example, then I have to add my catch related to the file IO. Okay, so these things are important. Now if you see here in our program, the one we are running here, this is actually not handling. Handling means something you do when that type of error occurs. Okay, so for example, I enter 4.0, so you give a message data entered is wrong, but I want user, because I can do that, I can let user enter correct value, right, because this is in my control. But if I am reading a file and the file is not there, that is not in my control, because I will call someone, hey, please go and put a file in that place, in that folder, then your program will read. But in this case, just give a message and guffle the program is not a good approach, right? What we want user to enter or give him another try, right? So how we can do? It's very simple, 2 or 2 logic.
No?
Yes, 2 or 2 logic. 2 or 2 logic. Now, what is important for you to understand? If I reach to this line, if I reach here, it means my program is running fine. If I don't reach here, I will let the program keep repeating it. That's the logic what you have to apply. Okay? When I reach here, it means what? There is no exception occur, right or no? Because I just mentioned to you that exception means, suppose if this line got an exception, all these lines of code will not be executed. All these will be skipped. If the exception occur in this line, all these are executed, but these lines of code are not executed, right? Because the exception occur in this line. In the same way, if the exception occur here, so your program will not reach to this line, to this place. So what I will do, I will use a Boolean variable, and I will make it true here, and false here, and in the beginning I will make it true, and I will say while true. That's it. So it will keep repeating. If there is an exception, because of the exception, it will not reach to this end of your try block, right? So the Boolean will be true, so it will give you a case. So that idea we are going to apply here. So for that, there is something they say you use the scanner here better. Okay, so what we do here, we use a Boolean variable. We'll say Boolean check something like this is equal to true. Okay, so what we do, we say okay Boolean, and then we say do all this up to here while check check. Is this a correct logic? While check, yes. And here we say check equal to false. Okay? So if everything works fine, check will be false, so he will come out of the loop. Otherwise, if there is an exception occur in this line, so these lines of code will not be executed. So check will be still true. So he will repeat. You understand? So this is actually the way of handling the exception. Okay. So of course, if I do like this, I have to go back to the code and change, because this is something like user. So we just leave as it is, this one. We will check this thing. Okay, so let's run this. I hope it should work. So we are trying to enter 4.0. Data entered is wrong, and then again you have to enter the data again, right? Now you enter the data correct, but the second data is wrong. Again, exception occurred, divide by 0. So what is actually happening? Let's try to analyze this. Let's try to see this step by step. Where is it? Yes, we are here. So first of all, we entered 4. 4 goes in A, but because of int, the exception occurred. So from this line, your code crashed. So this line does not execute. Okay, 17 does not execute. So as 18, so as 19, so as 20. So all these lines from 17 till 20 does not execute. So check was what? It was true. So it's still true. After that, it goes to the catch and it checks here whether it's an index out of bound. No. Whether it's an input mismatch. Yes. So it goes here. It gives you this message, data entered wrong, and after that because while true, it's still true, so it goes back here. And then again it stored the value, and then it gives you message this again here, right? Next time you entered 4, which is the correct value, it's stored here, 0, which is the correct value. So these two lines executes without any issue. And then when Java do this operation, a divided by 0, which is 4 divided by 0, here your program crashed. It means this line 19 and 20 does not execute successfully, right? So what will happen? Your program terminates, it goes here, it checks whether it's an array index or bound exception, no. Whether it's an input mismatch, no. Whether it's an arithmetic, yes, because the exception, the E, which generates, it is because of arithmetic exception. So it goes here and it gives you this message, divide by 0, error, and after that it checks, and of course it's true. So it will go back here, and again it is asking you to enter the value. Now once you enter the correct value, 10 and for example 2, what will happen now? 10 and 2, 10, 2, a 10 divided by 2, no problem, 5, and then check becomes false. So there is no catch, it does not go to the catch. Then it comes here, while false, immediately it comes out of the loop. Okay, so this is the way how we can basically let user enter the data, because it is in my control. So this is actually the meaning of handling. This is actually the meaning of handling. Because here we somehow overcome the issues of crashing. Our program was crashing in the previous case, but in this case, we somehow make our program does not crash in case of exception, and we let the user enter the correct values. Okay? So this is what we basically need to learn to write the the code that basically is called the portable code. Okay? So let me just go back to the slide. So we are here. So what they explain you. So let's try to see this again. So exception handling method should not terminate the program. The caller should decide whether to terminate the program. Okay, so this is the way they explain you about if you use the if. So that's why the if statement is not recommended. Okay, so you have to go for the exception handling. So what you do in exception handling, you put a try block. Okay, all this is the try, and then you have a catch. Okay, and I just showed you that. So they show you something. This I will explain you after some time. So what's going on? I will explain you. So they said something like throw new, but they have not yet explained you. So just no problem. Just leave it as it is. Okay. So throwing a new exception. So they explain you what is the throw and throws. So in short, what you need to know at this moment. Okay, this thing I am just not explaining you because there is no need at this level. I will explain in a moment. So what we do, we use the try and then we use the catch for it. Okay, so this is your try block. So it basically they give you a method here. Using the method they explain you, and the method is throwing the exception, means it is giving back the exception here. Okay, so you call a method, you give two values, and the method basically returns the result. In case if there is a like this, if number 2 is 0, then what you are doing, you are throwing an exception, and this message is returned. Divisor cannot be 0. This is the exception that basically is returned back. So this line will not execute. It will go here, and it will print this message. Okay, in this code. Now, okay. The second approach. So I think let me just show you the second approach also. So it will be easy for you to understand. Any question from the first approach? First approach, what we have done, we simply write the try and the catch, right? So we write the try block and then we write the catch. Okay, so I think I have to just for a time being, I have to. Where is the projector controller? Projector controller. Where is the projector controller? Anyway, I think I have to just switch it off from the here better. Just for a second. Yes. Good. Okay, so the second approach is what? What is the second approach? So the second approach uses certain keywords. So you have something called throw and throws. So we need to learn this. What is throw and what is throws? Okay? So let's try to analyze. So suppose you have some methods here. Okay? This is a method. Let's say this method is A. Okay? This is B. And this is your main. Okay? Now, suppose A is a lazy guy, B is also lazy. So if the exception occurs in A or in B, they don't want to handle it. They don't want to use the try and catch. What they want to just throw it back. So for example, if some problem comes to you, instead of you are solving the problem, you are just giving it to your friend, or you are just, sending the problem to somebody else to solve it. You understand the point? So sometimes we write application like that because we have one place where we handle all the issues. If the exception occur in the method, we simply throw it back to the one who calls the method. Okay? So how to say this? Suppose this is your method, and inside the method there are chances of exceptions. So what you will do in the method, you will declare that this method may be, this method will throw this exception. Okay? So how you will say this? Simply you will put here throws with S. Okay? So you will say throws with S, and then you will write the name of the exception that you think there are possibilities of having exception here. So for example, if you think there is a possibility of input mismatch exception because you are asking user to enter the data, so you will say here input, throw input mismatch exception. Suppose you have some calculation, so arithmetic exception, there are chances of arithmetic exception. Okay, so you will mention here of arithmetic exception. For example, maybe the spelling is wrong, no problem. Arithmetic exception. So what you are saying that this method, and how you write this method? Of course you write this method something like this. So what you are saying, this is a method, public void A, which maybe it will throw input mismatch exception, arithmetic exception. Okay? So using throws, you declare that this method maybe it will throw either this or this type of exception. Okay? So suppose you have a scanner, okay, and you have some variable int x and y in this method, okay, and you are saying x is equal to int dot next int. Okay? In the same way, y is equal to int dot next int. And then you have z is equal to x divided by y. Suppose these things you are doing it here. Now, the moment exception occurs here, your program or this method will do what? It will throw the exception. Where it will throw depend on this method, who is calling this method. If main is calling, he will throw the exception to the main. If B is calling, he will give the exception back to the B. Clear? So by using this declaration in the method signature, by saying throws and then the exception names, what you are saying that if the exception occur here, so this method will throw the exception to the one who calls this method, who calls main calls, for example. So you have to put here then try and then A and then catch, all these things you have to then put it in the main. Who calls A? Main is calling. So if the exception occur, he will throw the exception back to the main. For example, if B is calling, let's take another example. If B is calling, okay, so in that case, he will throw the exception to the for example B. Okay, so what we understand that sometimes a method does not handle the exception, a method throws the exception. So how you will write this, how you will say this in the coding, how you will tell Java that this method will throw an exception. You will write this keyword throws, THROWS, and then you will mention here what type of exception the method will throw. And that will be totally depend on your class or your code, what you are doing in the coding. If you are using array, then you will say it will be array index out of bound exception. If you are using file, then you will say file not found exception. If you are using, for example, database, then you will say whatever database related exceptions. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now the second term, because then we will go to the code. So what we have seen throws with S, very important. Where we use this, we use this in the method signature. Throw with S we use always in the method signature. And what is the purpose? The purpose is just to announce, just to tell that this method A will throw these type of exceptions. Clear? Now you have something called throw. Now this throw is used to actually generate the exception. Now this is what is happening when the user is entering the data wrong, then Java generates the exception. This thing, what happening when X and Y is 0, then Java generates the exception. Sometimes you also generate an exception. So you can do this by the keyword throw. Okay, so sometimes you generate an exception in your code by using the throw. So when I say throw new input mismatch exception, for example, if I say this, so what you are doing, I'm creating an object of input mismatch. You see here, if I don't do this, if I write like this, what is the meaning? I'm creating an object, right? Just like when I say new student, what I'm doing here? I'm creating an object of no name, an anonymous object. Same thing I'm doing here. I'm creating a new object of input mismatch, but because of this throw, it actually generates this exception. And here I will pass the parameter because it has a constructor. So I can pass here the reason why the exception occur, I can pass here. Now where I will use this concept? I will use this concept, suppose I'm writing a method called calculate cal area for a circle. Very important, listen very carefully. I'm showing you both the examples and we will go to the NetBeans button. Suppose I'm writing a method in any class, or this is a double, so let's say it, or let's say void. Okay, now here you are giving a radius. Okay, now calculate area circle. Suppose you have a radius here, radius is given something. Now this method, there are possibilities that it will generate an exception. What is that exception? What do you think, what is the exception in this method? In this method, what do you think when you consider something as an exception?
Return value.
Return value.
Think about radius. If I enter radius -1, is this correct value? -1 correct value? Can you draw a circle of -1? No. If you want to draw a circle, the radius must be always positive, right? Even if you draw a point something, it has a radius 0, for example. You cannot have a radius in negative. So the moment somebody enter a negative value, it is like an exception for you. It is not an exception for Java, but it is an exception for you. So what you will do? You will say here, this method maybe it will throws input mismatch exception. Okay? So this is what you will do. And then you will check. You will say if your radius is less than 0 or equal to, or let's say less than 0, then what you will do? Now you have to generate an exception because this is an exception for your program. Radius cannot be negative, right or no? So this is like an exception for your program. So what you will do? You will use the throw. So we have already used the throws. Now we have to use the throw. So we are generating an exception here. We say throw new input same type. Important is same type. If there is another type, again your program will crash because you have to mention the same type. So you say throw new input mismatch exception, and then you can pass the result. For example, you will say radius is negative. Okay, something like this. N-E-G-A-T-I-V. Anyway, the spelling you can check. So what we have done, in case the radius somebody entered is negative, immediately the exception will be thrown. Now this is our exception, not the Java. I mean, we don't write like this x as something else. Here the value what user has entered radius is the correct value, -4 for example. If somebody entered -4, if I call this method cal area circle, and I put -4. Now -4 as per the Java, it is a correct value, correct or not? Double is -4. Is this correct or not correct? Can we have -4 in the double?
Yes.
Yes. So as per the Java, there is no exception. But as per your code, this value is the exception. So sometimes based on the data, we can consider it is like an exception for us. So in our example here, an exception will be thrown similar like input mismatch exception. And we will ask user to give us the positive value, not the negative value. Okay, so we have to use the throw to generate an exception of this type, and because of this, what the method is doing, method is not handling the exception here, it is throwing back the exception to the whoever is calling main, so main has to handle it. You understand the point? So this is the main idea of second approach, that we throw the exception sometimes. So sometimes in your code, instead of handling the exception, what we do, we return back or throw back the exception to the one who is calling that method. Mainly in the method we use this idea. Throwing is always in the method. That is why when you use the file, what you do by the NetBeans option, you say throws file IO exception in the main. You remember? You write the file related programs. And at that time I told you we will discuss this. So now this is the main reasons. Okay? Any question you have? If you have any question, please ask, because I'm going to show you this, and then it will be easy for you to understand. Okay, so okay, let's try to learn. So this approach, I hope you understand. So let's try to see the second one. So I give with a different class name. So we'll say example throws, something like this. So I hope you will understand this. Okay, so very simple program, not complicated, and then we will later write some complicated programs also. Okay, so let's write this method. So we'll say public, we'll just copy this. Is it coming? Yeah, it's coming. Okay. So we'll say cal in circle area, something like circle CIR area, and here we are passing double radius radius. Okay. Now what new thing we are doing here? What new thing we are doing? So this is the normal way how you write a method. The new thing is here. New thing is on this line. Okay. So what you will say? You will say throws, and then input control space and input PUT input mismatch exception. You don't need to remember control space. You can use. Okay. So what we have done? We say that this method will throw basically input mismatch exception. And the same logic, we will say if the radius is less than 0 or equal to whatever condition you have, then what you do, you say throw, not S, throw, okay? New input mismatch exception, and here we can, you see it's a constructor, you see that there are two constructors available, one without parameter and one with parameter. So you can pass a parameter or you can just create it. So we use the second one because we want to give the actual reason, right? So we will say something like a radius, and then we put a value, something, you know, we want to make it like a better result. So we say radius, and then we close this and we say bracket close is entered.
Negative value.
Yeah, is wrongly entered or wrong, is entered wrong. Something like this, okay? So this is done. Otherwise we calculate the area. We know that how to calculate, so we say just area, and then we just say math.pi, right? Math.pi into radius. So this is a simple program. Now let's call this method here. Something is missing. Okay, so we enter here, for example, 4.0 and minus 4.0. Of course, you have to use the try and catch here. So you have to say try, okay, because it returns this to the main. So you say try and then catch, and input mismatch E. Now this is what you get. E is the object, okay. So you just say E dot get message. E dot get message. You see, all these are methods, and it returns a string, and that you can print it. Okay. So get message is the method that is available in most of the classes. Okay. So I hope it is clear. Any explanation is required what we are doing. So in the first case, he will give me the answer, but in the second case, exception will be thrown, and he will give me that radius -4 is entered wrong. Okay, is wrong or wrong or something like wrong, something like this. First case it will run without any problem, but in the second case I will get an exception. So let's trace this. So you can see here. So in the first case we get the result, and in the second case radius -4 is wrong. Okay, because second is our exception case. So this is the another way how you can, for example, how you can generate the exception based on your own conditions. Okay, because -4 is a correct value. It's not an exception. Java cannot throw an exception for -4, but you ask Java to throw it because you don't consider these negative values for this case. And same way, like you are generating a month. Month cannot be anything above 12 or below 1, right? Month can be always from 1 to 12. So if you suppose you are calculating something and that calculation is giving you the month. So if the user, if that calculation is generating a month which is 13, 14, your program will, right, consider it as an exception. And there are so many examples like that. Suppose user is entering the date and you are issuing a driving license. So if someone is less than 18, so you will consider as an exception for your program because the data is wrong. Okay, so I hope you get an idea. I hope it is enough for this lecture. So what we have learned in this lecture is what is an exception. Now if someone asks what is exception, please don't say try and catch. Try and catch is not an exception.
Handling.
It's a handling. Exceptions are runtime errors that appears when that program is running, and there are hundreds of reasons for that. So this is your answer. Now how you handle it, try and catch is one of the way how you handle the exception. Okay, so you put everything in try and then you have the catch. And the other approach what we have seen in the handling is somehow that when we are throwing the exception. Okay, so that means we have a method, and this method does not want to handle the exception, so he will just throw if the exception occur, it will return back to the one who calls him. Not that it will always return to the main. It depends on who is calling this method. Main is calling, so he will throw it back to the main. If someone else is calling, he will throw it there. Okay? So we have just learned the very basic concept of exception. So in the next class, I will increase the level of complexity. So please, this chapter is already available to you in the blackboard. Please go through it. Advantage of exception, and there are other concepts are there, checked exception, unchecked exceptions. So we will discuss this in the next class, and there are other concepts that are related to this checked and unchecked. So we are going to see this in the next class, okay? And then the throw and the throws I already gave you, but we will see with some more complex example. Okay, so this is what they explain. Okay, so I think that's enough for this lecture. So inshallah, see you in the next class.